Welcome to the Startup Grind.
Alright, with big chairs.
Yes.
Or then we're just small people.
No, we're very tall, Fritz, very tall. Alright, so my first question has to be, like, as we already had a little chat, how does somebody who on the paper has an educational background on business and marketing become the CEO of a tech company?
Well, first of all, I have to say I'm good at apparently selling myself, so I got in, so to speak. But the real story is I've pretty much always been interested in technology. I was sort of lucky enough to have my dad buy me an Amiga 500 when I think I was 7. And that was sort of my first touch with computers, and that was when I got interested in sort of the games and opportunities one could do with a computer. But that was like at the end of 80s, and ever since then they more or less played a big part in my life. Not always to the liking of my parents, but hopefully they now understand the value a little bit better. But yeah, I've done a lot of stuff with computers, sort of trial and error kind of things, online, different kind of ventures and so forth. So I would say I'm pretty fluent with technology, sort of coding to a certain degree. I understand what can be done, but I don't create code myself.
Okay. And how did you end up studying business?
Well, my dad actually wanted me to sort of go into sort of natural sciences and become an engineer. But for some reason I never really, I never really found that passionate, a passion of mine or anything of that nature. So somehow I think we took like a trip to a business school when we were in high school, and that sort of opened my eyes to the opportunities. Like, okay, there's actually something else outside engineering as well. So
There's another world outside of Nokia.
exactly.
Yeah.
So that was how I got into business, and then also sort of very big part of my studies was also the international sort of aspects of my studies. So all of my studies were in English, even in Finland, and that is also due to the fact that we spent about I think it was 4.5 years in Singapore in the early 1990s, and that sort of gave me the spark to you know, have some international aspects to my life, pretty much more or less. That's how it got started.
And did you know you wanted to start, to be an entrepreneur at some point in your life, or were you after the corporate career?
I never really thought about it that much, but you know, one could say I probably stumbled on it, on the opportunity or the way of life a little bit. I was doing this summer job at a larger company, and then when I got back to my university studies from that summer job, I wanted to earn a little bit more money than what you get from the very gracious Finnish state. But the only options for someone who doesn't have a degree yet would be to go to, you know, a local grocery store or help out, very sort of manual type of work. But then I came up with this plan that I could probably do some just sort of number crunching type of work for the company over the course of the winter, and I proposed this concept to my sort of employer from the summer, and they said that okay, yeah, that makes sense, and you know, we'll pay you by the hour. You can do the work at your home on your computer. We'll send you the material, and that's sort of how I got probably started a little bit on the entrepreneurial side of things. And pretty soon after that, I started creating the sort of websites and different kind of online presences for some friends and family kind of businesses.
So building websites was your first moment when you got into your own business?
Yeah, sort of something that I took a little bit more seriously, yeah. But I mean, I had been doing my own personal websites for a long time before that. So I started my own blog in 2002, I think, without a content management system. So I did it all by hand, and updating was a bit tough, but yeah, that got me started.
What were you blogging about?
Well, I mean, if you look at the people who come to Facebook the first time ever, and the sort of first generation, it's something between very amateur kind of an article on a topic and something of a diary entry, so something in between. I mean, there wasn't really a scene back then on what you would blog about, or what topics you could follow up on, sort of comment on your own blog from another blogger or something like that. So it was completely random at that point in time.
Okay. You told me that you got into investing, stock markets. And what point in life did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of managed to save up a little bit of money, and then did some very basic investing kind of stuff. I never really was any good at it, so I can't really say I made any money of it. But that really got me interested into how the stock market works, how corporate financials work, why companies do the choices or make the decisions they do, and sort of that probably opened up my eyes a little bit to the way the whole investment market works. And yeah, I mean, I'm not very mathematical by any means, but I've always been interested in sort of numbers behind companies, and I've been sort of very data-driven, you could say. So it sort of follows those lines.
Were you much of a risk taker with your investing and trading?
Yeah, I mean, I had the underlying theory was that always invest what you can completely lose, and well, I never really completely lost it, but I pretty much always aim for the highest return. So
Never got into bitcoins?
No, not really.
There was a little hesitation there.
No, because I mean, sort of, I did put like 20 euros at some point into Coinbase, but that was more because I wanted to understand how the onboarding process works. So,
oh well, it was Coinbase, so it was already too late.
Yeah, I know. So that was mainstream big time.
Okay. We had like a small conversation. You told me something that to me was fantastic. We seem to have one thing that we did as kids in common that I've been made fun of, but I think it's fantastic. So you've been always very good and careful with your money, and you've always kept track of your expenses. Can you elaborate a little more on that?
Yeah, so it sort of falls to the same point in time when I was looking for work at during my studies, and as a student you don't have a lot of money, and you need to be pretty careful where you spend it, and so forth. So I actually came up with this sort of horrendous Excel sheet where I input all my purchases, no matter how big they were, and sort of categorize them in different categories with the dates and everything. So after a while I had like a monthly cash flow statement on my personal financing as a student. So the money coming in and going out is not a lot, but I always knew how much money I could spend or sort of just splurge with evening out with friends or something, and that I always sort of understood the implications of putting your money somewhere, and what that would mean for the rest of the month until you get another sort of a paycheck or income from somewhere. And
it's perfectly normal.
Yeah, like you said, it's some friends saw some oddities in that, but I think it has actually helped quite a lot. Sort of built an underlying understanding of how cash flow works. It's not rocket science by any means, but when you build it into your way of thinking, and it sort of helps your decision making and the timing of your investments, it all falls together quite nicely.
So what was your first real business? When did it stop being a hobby and did it move into something real?
Yeah, I would say it was to do with the websites. I mean, I never really made that much money off them, but it was something sort of mentally thinking that would be something where I sort of began putting enough focus and attention efforts into that. So, trying to source a very low-cost hosting environment for the websites, making those decisions where you can actually host a lot of websites on one small space, and then trying to cater to different customers and sort of commercialize your services into different products, so that there's the basic setup of a website and then the administrative work after that, and how much you actually charge for that on a monthly basis. So sort of like biz dev kind of thinking came into question at a certain point. So, money-wise, I didn't make a lot of money off that, but it sort of like opened my eyes into all the different aspects you need to take care of when you actually run a business.
Last month we had Dimitri, the current CEO of ArcticStartup. He is the original founder of ArcticStartup. How did you get started with that, and why did you start that?
So, I think we started ArcticStartup in 2007, and by that time I had already been blogging for about 5 years. First with movable type, and then with WordPress from one of the very first WordPress versions. And yeah, I mean, I had been I sort of had grown into blogging a lot more, and then sort of these different topics came up, and so technology was a big part of a big interest of mine. And at that moment in time, there weren't a lot of blogs, or I would say even media coverage in general regarding growth companies or startups, as they more commonly known these days. And then I just sort of blogged on my own personal website that I'm thinking of starting this startup-related blog about technology companies, and share the news, what they're doing, and sort of spread some light on this whole sort of industry or group of companies. And then Miikka Kukkosuo, he for some odd reason he found that post, and he said that, are you still thinking about that, because I'm actually interested in the same topic as well. So we had this idea that, okay, if everything goes well, we might one day organize an event or something as well. So it was still very much of a hobby, but we got going in 2007, and I don't know, we probably posted like 2 stories a week or something very small by today's standards. But every time we posted a new story, we started looking at the page views, and the sort of interest began to grow, and that was sort of like, okay, there's actually something behind this. So, and it's not something I completely came up with by myself, that a technology blog. I think TechCrunch had been started a little earlier, and I've been following Michael Arrington's posts for some time, and maybe a couple of other blogs as well. But I wanted to do something like that related to the Nordics and Finland.
So were you getting information? I mean, there was.
Yeah, that was the tough part, because of course companies did post some PR statements and news items on their own websites, and that was sort of where we got started. And then people started contacting us pretty early on about their own news and hey, we've got this product launch coming up. Are you interested in covering it? And after a while, the sort of sourcing of news got pretty easy.
And how easy was it? What was the perception of what you were doing from like the general public? Because we've had like some conflicting views from Dimitri and Mark in the previous talks. Like Mark has been here for a much longer time, and he's sort of experienced the point where the startup community was, not only not supported, it was sort of ridiculed. That this is not really the way to go. So what was it when you started? What was it like, the climate?
We were just sort of beginning to stand on our own feet again after the 2001 .com sort of crashes and whatnot, and technology companies were again slowly beginning to be interesting. I think Sumea was sold to Digital Chocolate just a while earlier. One of the sort of mobile gaming companies, Ilkka Paananen, one of the founders of Supercell. He was part of that, and so there was a little bit of an activity bubbling under, but not a lot. And I would say back then the general notion towards startups was that it's a nice hobby. GDP wise, it's non-existent. As of national interest in general, doesn't really make any sense. But it's good, people have these different kind of activities. I did get my fair share of don't leave your day job. But actually, when I started ArcticStartup, I already had sort of jumped ship from this other gaming company to start a digital agency with sort of a consulting agency with 9 other guys. So we're just a sort of a group of 10-ish people getting started. So I was already sort of an entrepreneur at that point in time. So
when did you actually move to full time? When did they become profitable? Because I would imagine
for
ArcticStartup.
So 2009. That was 2009. I worked at their consultancy for 2 years, and then I sort of ArcticStartup success had or interest from the public side had grown so much that I was spending all my evenings after I got home from work writing stories for the next day, and sometimes getting up at 6 and then doing one quick story before I left off to work, and so it was just unbearable at that point. So I had to make the decision.
All right. So was it easy to get people to pay for? How were you monetizing with ArcticStartup at the beginning? Now they have like paid posts. They used to have banners. How difficult was it to get? Do you remember when you got your first money in ArcticStartup?
Yeah, we made I think it was a deal of 8,000 euros. That was a ton of money at that moment in time. So we got 8,000 euros from a law firm, and they wanted basically sort of visibility into the startup space for themselves, and it was pretty traditional banner advertising, sort of very brand type of advertising at that point in time. But I think very soon after we realized that we need to start doing events, we started these events called Arctic Evenings, and sort of a fireside chats, sort of presentations by interesting people to the local audience, sharing of war stories with regards to entrepreneurship and so forth. And for every event, we tried to get a sponsor on board to pay for the drinks and venue and stuff like that. So that's where it kind of got started. But you very early realize that, we realized that it's very, very difficult to monetize online media at that scale, and it's still a problem. That hasn't been solved. So
and then you went on to organize the first Arctic 15 conference.
Yeah, so one of our co-founders, Ville Westerinen, he was also one of the co-founders of Slush. So Slush was organized a little bit earlier, but that didn't really pick up, and during its second or third year. So we thought that, you know, instead of them doing it, let's try our sort of our own event, and we went on to put together Arctic 15, and I think it was about 500 people who came up to the first event, and but we still had like pretty good speakers and sponsors, so we sort of did it in a proper manner from the first year.
And then, when did you decide to move on to the next project? What was the reasoning behind it? What was going through your head at the time?
So that was probably until the end of 2012, when I already sort of had been running ArcticStartup on the side and full-time, so, you know, together some 5 years. I probably had written like, I don't know, 3,000-4,000 blog posts by that time. So it was a lot of stuff covered, but it sort of came after the realization that, you know, it's tough to scale a media company online with limited resources, and especially everybody was really, I don't know, they sort of held back in supporting us. You know, they wanted to see something like ArcticStartup flourish and sort of for the common good, but everybody was pretty afraid of supporting us because we were a for-profit company. So it's weird, but most of the governmental agencies were like, you know, this is something that we should be doing, but we're very happy that you're doing it, but there's the problem that you're a for-profit, so we can't really give you any governmental grants because you might take it out as, you know, of your company dividends, and you know that it was really awkward. But I'm really happy to see Slush and the Aalto ES sort of events and phenomena happening in Finland these days. So there's a lot of different platforms supporting sort of startups and entrepreneurship nowadays. But yeah, so to actually answer your question, it was towards the end of 2012, and that I realized that, you know, it's a nice business, but it's more or less going to be a lifestyle kind of a business.
Yeah. Not very easy to go for an exit.
Yeah, and even scale it up as into a bigger business. So you know, it's easy to do it when you are a group of 2 to 4 people, but at least that was the view back then. And I always had been sort of interested in technology and scalable technology companies, online businesses. So that was the time I sort of made the decision that, okay, let me see if actually I would sort of jump the fence to the other side and see if I can find a job and work somewhere else.
So how did you actually get involved with UpCloud?
So UpCloud, I know UpCloud's founder, Joel Pihlema, from probably 2010, 2011, and he had been pitching me UpCloud, the service, for about a year. So I knew that they were coming out with a really interesting service, and the technology was phenomenal behind it, and the whole cloud sort of hype and trend was really picking up back then. And so I knew what the guys were building, I knew what they already had sort of achieved, and after I made the decision to, you know, let's leave ArcticStartup behind, I didn't have any idea what to do next, but I sort of pinged Joel that, you know, let's go have some lunch and see what, you know, how you guys are doing, and just sort of catch up. But we never ended up having that lunch, but he did sort of send me a sort of a proposal, like, you know what we're building at UpCloud, and I think you might be a good fit to sort of run with start building a team around it and run with the company.
So you became employee number one?
Yeah, basically, yeah. And there was it was a funny coincidence because after I had sort of signed the work papers and everything, Joel told me that a couple of our mutual friends had been sort of suggesting me to him as a he's out of a job currently, so go talk to him. And funny, karma works in interesting ways sometimes.
And I mean, if the perception was at that point that it was supporting startups is still a cute thing, supporting a startup that is going against giant must have been just pure crazy, because you were entering quite a competitive. Was it still as competitive space?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Probably Google still wasn't very well known back then as a sort of a cloud service provider. I mean, they definitely had services out there, but Amazon was the biggest, and everybody knew that the big technology companies will be very dominant in the space. But I don't know. Relatively speaking, the stuff UpCloud or the team at UpCloud had already achieved at that moment in time, it was very impressive, and I don't know, it's sort of that, and then my previous view on how companies go about building themselves and how the teams build the different kinds of companies and their successes, and I don't know, like how rational are these decisions ever? So I don't know. I had a very strong gut feeling, and it's good that it paid off so far.
Actually, before I get into more questions, can you explain, because people watching this also from other parts of the world,
sure.
Tell them what is UpCloud, what do you do exactly, and what do you do different?
Sure. So UpCloud is we're a sort of cloud computing company, cloud hosting company. So in essence, what we do is we sell server resources and networking resources by the hour, and sort of in a self-service model. So meaning you can create an account at our website, and once you've created the account, you can deploy servers. And once you have those servers deployed, with the choice of your operating system, you can basically start building your applications or web services on those services. So, and the way we sort of do things differently at UpCloud is that, like you said, the industry is dominated by some of the largest technology companies globally. Having said that, I think there are a lot of areas, maybe niche areas, but very still sort of monetarily very interesting markets, where those big giants can't offer really good service. And so we've identified SMEs as one of those areas. So companies and developers basically who require the enterprise capability, but can't put up with the complexity of those services. So they want a simple, high performance, reliable service. So that's sort of where we try to build our position. And we try to, I sort of try to follow this lean methodology quite extensively. So we try to validate all our hypotheses and thinking on the customer sort of front as much as we can. So those are some of the attributes that are actual pain points for many SMEs, and we're slowly getting there, but it looks very good so far.
How big are you? Can you give us some numbers to get an idea of your company?
So we're just a group of 10 people for now, but we have 4 data centers, one here in Helsinki, London, Chicago, and Frankfurt. And our model is basically that we don't build the walls to those data centers ourselves. We don't put the cables in for electricity. We purchase that service from the best providers on the market. But where we put our own knowledge is basically in how we build the service with the help of the networking and server equipment. But regarding financial numbers since it's being recorded. I'll be a little bit more conservative, but we are sort of very happily cash flow positive at this moment, and it's a pretty capital intensive industry. So we put a lot of money into the physical servers, but if you look at the numbers of hiring 10 very smart people, the salaries of those people, then the different server equipment, and being cash flow positive, I get the picture from there.
So you're talking about your team. We had like a very interesting conversation with Dimitri, as he has like some very unique approaches. Can you tell us something about your approach to team building, what you look for in people, what people should look for, some suggestions on how to build a great team?
So I don't know if it's a good thing or not, but I'm not very. I don't have like a consistent methodology, very data-driven approach to hiring people, but it's like a couple of things that I always check before I sign any papers with people is that you need to have, at least looking at our current setup at UpCloud, you need to have some references on what you've done before, and sort of some success at that, because while we sort of to a certain degree praise failure, and I sort of understand it, and it's a a very big part of everybody's lives when you do high risk things, but we wouldn't want to be at this moment in time the place where you sort of start learning your first steps. Yeah. We can be the place where you continue learning, but you probably would have needed to have done some mistakes in the past and sort of show your learning through references. And the second thing is, of course, some sort of signal of ambition, passion towards your work, and that can be part of your day job or something outside of it. So, whatever you do on the side of your work related to your ambitions, and you can actually prove that to a certain degree. And then probably the third part is there needs to be a very good social and sort of cultural fit with the existing team. So I'm a big believer in sort of culture and what that can achieve for companies when you build a good culture. I think that's one of the biggest sort of underutilized strengths and opportunities of companies everywhere. So,
what's your definition of culture? Because we hear a lot talking about it, but it's mostly kept at a high-level concept. Like, how do you actually implement? How do you build a culture? What is the culture that you're looking for?
So I think there was a good definition of culture by Sami Inkinen, Finland originated entrepreneur working in the States. He said that culture is what happens when the leader of the company leaves the picture. So what people actually get done and how they work when there are nobody to lead them. So and how do you build a culture? It's basically as someone in charge of leading a company, I've come to realize that one of the best ways to build a culture is simply to try and find the right ways to empower your employees and support them in what they're trying to get done. And culture is a lot more than ping pong tables and pool tables and whatnot. It's also the sort of way your employees can communicate with their peers, what's sort of expected of them as well, how they can contribute, what they can take out, and those are the sort of more subtle things, I think, in culture. But then, of course, there are very concrete things like giving a lot of trust from day one to your employees. So some of these can be I mean, one of the things, for example, we at UpCloud have is that we have this sort of personal budget that everybody has, all of our employees have, and they can use the budget as they wish regarding their own personal work. So be it educating themselves, or they don't have to get any pre-approval from the management, so to say. They can use that budget as they wish, as long as it has something to do with their work. In addition to that, of course, we try to offer as much opportunity to actually sort of educating people, getting the right tools in place. That all comes from the company, but then we want to sort of give the people an opportunity to do things that they would want to do. And I think there's a good saying that two people discussing that we can't invest into our people, because what if we invest, say, educationally, and then they leave, and then the other person says that don't worry about that. What if we don't invest and they stay? So that's sort of the opposite. So it's not about being afraid of people leaving, that you have actually invested into them. It's sort of keeping the ball rolling and giving them the best possible workplace.
Have you ever gotten any of your hires wrong?
Yeah, I mean, obviously. I'm just trying to think. So I would say the areas where we and I definitely got hiring wrong is on the expected performance of the people. So like, as people, they fitted my requirements and what I'd like to see in building a team and culture, but as in expected performance, what they actually achieve at the work, then that's where there was a mismatch. And not us at UpCloud, but at my previous jobs, I've had to let go of people.
And how do you deal with failure? So let's talk about some major fuck-ups that you've had.
I don't know.
We all like to say that, especially with Selisa, that fail fast, fail often, but what really goes through your head?
Yeah, I mean, because I don't try to avoid failure, but I try to avoid major failure. Let's put it that way. So failing fast, fail often. As we try to validate a lot of different things with our customers all the time, I would say. I think we have a very good understanding where we are expected to be going and where we want to go as well. Having said that, I think some of the, because failure, even for me, is still somewhat of it has too much of a sort of a negative connotation to it. It's more of like, what are the biggest learning experiences I've had? So, that's probably has to do with again, maybe investing your resources in areas where the payback wasn't fast enough, and that sort of changes the dynamics of your own thinking and where you need to go. I think also, I mean, the stuff that really scares me sometimes is like the stuff that I don't know that I probably should know.
Okay.
So, like I have a good gut feeling and try to validate this as well, but we are doing a lot of right things, but you always have that hunch that, what if there is something that I probably should have known, but then it comes up. So, and I don't know if that approach is, human nature preparing for failure, but as a CEO, you're expected to know a lot of things, and if not know the things yourself, you have very close by, the information very close by. So.
Do you dwell on the past, or once a decision is made, it's been...
Yeah, I'm pretty good at leaving sort of, leaving stuff behind and sort of continuing. You can't really change that, so what's done is done, and continue.
But sometimes it's hard. It's like
Yeah, I mean the biggest, biggest failures and so forth would be sort of unachieved opportunities, sort of like because there's opportunity all around us, but yeah, you miss a lot of the shots that you take. So I guess that's one way to put it as well.
What about the opposite? We've talked about failure, success. Do you go after small victories or the big victory?
I mean, obviously we have a big plan where we want to go with UpCloud, but we try to, like this whole lean methodology way of thinking. I think from that it sort of stems that we try to get a lot of small victories, or it's sort of inevitable to a certain degree that when you validate a lot of the things, or you don't plan a lot of stuff before you validate that idea or hypothesis on some front, we tend to sort of get a lot of smaller successes, and those are then celebrated, obviously.
And so what's next for UpCloud now? You told us where you're at now.
It's definitely scaling a company. I mean, we've been we're cash flow positive, we're revenue funded currently, so there are limitations to our resources and what we can do, but there's opportunity all around us. There's growth, sort of forecastable growth coming our way, but it's like, how do you make that all work and then still sort of up the game a couple of more levels? So, it always sounded funny to me when entrepreneurs were giving talks, and one of the big challenges is like scaling a company. It's like, what?
All right, let's talk about your role as an advisor. You've had some roles as an advisor in a couple of companies.
Yeah.
Why did you become an advisor? Did they ask you, or did you decide to do that? And why should companies get advisors?
It was probably a bit of both. I've been an advisor to my sort of friend's company who, there's technology behind it, but it's basically a organic food company, and so he's into the sort of manufacturing side of that business, and I tried to bring in at the early days sort of advice on what steps he should take and in what order, and sort of help him prioritize a little bit. But they're always very interesting positions to have. As an advisor yourself, you get to see a lot of new industries and how people work in different industries. So they're very educational. Should you have an advisor? It depends. Like where we are now, we would probably build an advisory board of people who are, or who have experience in scaling companies internationally, and sort of online technology companies, I would say. So advisory boards and boards in general, I think they should be limited by time, so be it 1 or 2 year terms, and keep changing the people on board of those, so to get the best people at each stage of your company's life cycle, because it's obvious that you can't have a person who knows everything or is like a super brilliant person in growing the company, taking it to the stock market or whatever. So, there's a lot of different steps in between, and there's so much talent around the world that you probably need to shuffle people a little bit.
Yeah. And advice on like what kind of advisor to avoid, because nowadays it's getting also fashionable. People want to feel important, so they'll join a startup as an advisor.
I mean, I recently heard a good way of explaining what a board does and how a board or an advisory board functions with regards to the entrepreneur or the CEO. It's basically a sort of either a support helicopter or a rescue helicopter or a gunship that takes part in helping you, but it will never sort of fight the fights for you. So it's a resource that you can utilize in different ways, but it will never do your job. So when you think about advisory boards and boards in general in that way, it sort of helps you understand what you can achieve with that kind of a function or support role. And it's mostly, advisories are mostly good for strategy, people who have done the mistakes previously or learned something from their previous ventures at those moments in time where what you are going through now. So it kind of depends at what stage you are and what your own personal background is. So it kind of all depends.
But like, if you were to advise more companies nowadays, what would you set time frame? Like, I can give this amount of time, I will help you achieve these different things. What kind of advisor?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I probably I don't do any advisory stuff at the moment because all available time from my family and myself go into UpCloud, and as an advisor, you probably should limit the time that you work with a startup, but it's still a job that you have to be very, very involved. So it's not something that you can do an hour a week. I'll every Sunday from 3 to 4, I'm the advisor for this company. Doesn't, in my opinion, quite work like that. So you need to be, you constantly need to set aside bandwidth in your brain for that startup throughout your day. So that's not something I'm able to do at this moment. So trying to put my focus completely on UpCloud and where we're headed.
Cool. Then, I'm going to end with that question because I would like to get some questions also from the audience. So
sure.
Thank you very much for taking the time for answering questions.
Thank you.
Round of applause.